Welcome back, all. Hopefully you're all refreshed on some coffee to give you that energy to keep your focus on our next topic, which is about cutting-edge approaches and techniques, how other sports tackle integrity threats. This session will examine those investigations, the intelligence gathering, integrity programs used by other sports to tackle current and future threats, as well as the application of governance standards in other sports to protect their integrity. We will have 3 speakers that we will hear from, then short questions on the panel, followed by an opportunity for you all to ask questions. First of all, I'd like to welcome Jenny Kennedy, Senior Director, Investigations, International Tennis Integrity Agency.
Hello. Thank you very much to the IFHA for inviting me today. I find it entirely hilarious that my session is entitled Cutting Edge, when you'll notice that I've managed to number my slides 1, 2, 4. So I'm not entirely sure about the cutting edge nature of that. How do I move these slides on? There we go. So in my 15 minutes, this is what I'm hoping to cover. I was asked to give a bit of an explanation about the ITIAA because I realised that there probably is not a huge amount of tennis experts in this room, and if you are one, please keep quiet so that you don't make me look stupid. Our processes, our powers, and our approach, and just a bit of a brief on our current challenges. So we'll start with remit and structure. This is who we are. And this is what we're about: promoting, engaging, and encouraging the safeguarded integrity of professional tennis worldwide. This slide has an awful lot of words on it, but basically we're a completely independent agency. We are funded by what's called the Tennis 7, which is the International Tennis Federation, the ATP, which is the men's tour, the WTA, which is the women's tour, and the 4 Grand Slams. They effectively fund us in our entirety, but we are completely independent of those bodies. We do have members of those bodies on our board, but our board is majority independent. We're responsible for what's called the Tennis Anti-Doping Programme, which is all drug testing in professional tennis. We're also responsible for the Tennis Anti-Corruption Programme, which covers match fixing, betting, and related corruption issues. In terms of us as a business, very similar to how Brant described the BHA's setup. So our board is majority independent. We have an independent chair and 4 independent directors, and then the 4 tennis member directors. We've had responsibility for the TACP for a slightly longer period than we have for the TADP. So corruption came first, and then we took over the doping remit. In terms of the business, as you can see there, we've got an education team because it all starts there. We sort of see it as a virtuous circle, really, but educating is a huge part of what we do. Then we have an intelligence team. As with Brant, we've got trained and professional analysts who have a lot of experience in forensic downloading and the analyst capability that comes with that. We have an investigations team, which I lead, an anti-doping team, a legal team, and then obviously business services, who always get forgotten because they're just the people who sort out paying us and stuff, but they're really quite important. We're based in London, but we have a worldwide remit. So we're based in Roehampton, which is southwest London, just up the road from Wimbledon, but the rent's not quite as expensive, but we cover the whole world. So this is how we work. It is slightly different TACP to TADP, but in general, it's very similar to this. So we'll either receive a finding or an allegation or some intelligence that makes us think that perhaps a breach has occurred, whether it be TADP or TACP. There's actually a stage in there that's not on there, which would be an intelligence triage. So that's when our intel team will do a triage. We get quite a lot of allegations coming from disgruntled bettors that the intelligence team are able to screen out straight away because they're not really based in any kind of fact. But then once it gets through that triage, and if it's forwarded to me for a decision on investigation and it gets raised to an investigation, then an investigation commences. If we get to the stage where we think there's a case to answer, then that goes to our legal team, who will decide on whether it's a warning, something that we can deal with informally as a warning, or whether it's something that needs to go to charge. We can then actually move to an agreed sanction process if the offender, whoever that might be, admits to the offence, and it's an offence that's not classed as a major offence, so that means that under our rules the sanction would be 6 months or less, then we can agree on a sanction for that. If they aren't prepared to admit the offence, then we go to hearing. Unfortunately, we go to hearing quite a lot. There's then a sanction issued, and then there is an appeal process which under the AHO, under the TACP, goes to CAS, just as it would under the TADP. We are WADA compliant, so we are bound by the World Anti-Doping Agency Code, so our TADP, all our doping offences mirror the WADA code. Both processes, TACP and TADP, are agreed and approved by the player councils and the tours. So although we're independent, we do consult with them about the rules. Any changes to the rules are always consulted upon. For TACP, if it goes to a hearing stage, it is heard by a single sitting hearing officer, independent hearing officer. They're all lawyers, all very experienced lawyers. They are based all the way around the world. And it is a single individual who hears the case and then makes a ruling. If that is appealed, then it will go up to CAS. We don't have an internal appeals process. It goes straight to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. As with WADA, if it's the anti-doping offence that is being heard, then it is heard by Sports Resolutions, who are an independent sports tribunal service based in the UK. And again, if there's an appeal to those decisions, that would go to CAS as well. So and I know Susan is here from CAS, we see CAS a lot. So where are our powers? The TADP and the TACP both define the powers that we have as an organisation, both our investigative powers and the process for applying them. As we are not a statutory agency, we're not bound in statute, so we effectively govern by consent. The players who wish to play in professional tennis sign up to the rules and agree to be bound by the powers and the offences in the TACP and TADP. We love an acronym, by the way. There's lots of initials in tennis. So we can't force anybody to do anything, but we have no search or seizure powers, which can be very frustrating at times. But this is balanced by our standard of proof, which is the civil standard of proof. But just because tennis is complicated, the anti-doping rules are based in Swiss law, the TACP cases are based in Florida law, but we're basically bound by the civil standard of proof of preponderance of the evidence for our corruption cases. We use mobile forensic downloads a lot. That's where we get a lot of our evidence from. Again, it's a power that's conferred on us under the TACP. There are stages to get through for us to demonstrate that it's proportionate and necessary to make a download of somebody's phone. But it is a crucial power for us. We find a lot of our evidence based in mobile downloads, whether it be deleted data or data that still sits on the phone. It's constantly evolving. It's a constant challenge for us to keep up with how the technology works and how people are using their devices, but it's a really important part of what we do. We never really used it in a doping context before, but that is changing, and we are looking to use it more for doping cases as well as for corruption cases. And interestingly, or maybe not, but we are now starting to see a crossover. So people who have been involved in corruption offences, we found evidence of doping offences as well on their phone, or vice versa, which I think just demonstrates the fact that if you're prepared to take a risk, you're prepared to take a risk, whether that's in a doping context or a corruption context. And then lastly, one of our offences is failing to cooperate. It's really important if someone, as we did have championships quite recently, where they saw our staff coming towards them, handed their mobile that they'd been visible on, we'd been watching them for a little while, to someone who they purported to be their brother, who then legged it out of the venue. And that was something that we charged for failing to cooperate, that he knew that we wanted his phone. It was his phone, or it was a phone he was in control of at the time. And he deliberately made sure that we weren't able to get hold of it. So that offence is really important, because otherwise if they just say, no, you're not having my phone and I'm not going to be willing to be interviewed, there's not a lot we can do. So that is a really important rule for us. We'll just gloss over the numbering. So I thought I'd give you a bit of a picture of what tennis looks like. I think most people who aren't involved in tennis think this is tennis, and it is tennis, but it's a tiny portion of tennis, and most tennis looks like this. That is professional tennis, believe it or not. It is very, very common, and that's where a lot of corruption occurs at that level. It'd be wrong to say that it doesn't occur at the first picture either. We have picked up people at Grand Slams, although 9 times out of 10 they're not corrupting the games in the Grand Slam, but they are people who can get in and play at least in the qualifying rounds. So I think sports have to be careful of assuming that prize money and big amounts of finance can prevent corruption. It can be a deterrent, undoubtedly, but don't assume that everybody is doing this for money. And we've definitely got cases where we can show that the individuals are not short of money and it's just down to greed. So I think it's just something to be very careful of. But when you're dealing with tennis at this level and it's still classed as professional tennis, that means that at every matches on those courts, you can bet on every point, you can bet on every game, you can bet on every set, and you can bet on every match. So tennis is set up, or it's not set up, but it is an ideal sport for betting. There's so many markets running all the time on tennis matches, and yet professional tennis is being played at venues like this where accreditation, access, security is really difficult. They're they're struggling for funds. It makes it a difficult environment to police. This is a diagram that I think kind of shows that quite a lot as to why tennis is at risk from corruption. The red tip of the first pyramid is basically ATP, WTA, and Grand Slam events. So this is the top level of tennis. This is the tennis that is being played by, the Carlos Alcarazes of this world, the Coco Gauffs of this world. These are the tennis players you will have heard of that you see on the TV, and that's the percentage of tennis at that level. You'll see that obviously the majority of the pyramid is ITF Tour Championships, ATP Challenges, and WTA 125, which is the lowest level of the ATP and WTA, does fall in there as well, but you see the majority is there. So the following pyramid shows you the division of the money. So I think it's pretty clear as to why it's a risk, because most of the money is going to the very, very top part of the pyramid, and the money left over at the bottom is very low. So that's definitely one of our challenges in tennis. One of the reasons why it's a risk is definitely to do with money. But here are some of our other and current challenges, and I'm sure listening today it's been fascinating to learn about the world of racing, something that I'm probably like some of you, you probably go to Wimbledon and that's what you know of tennis, or you go to the US Open. I go to the Cheltenham Gold Cup and Ascot, and that's what I know of racing. So listening to you guys today has been absolutely fascinating to me. But you'll see from what I've put on this slide, the numbers of issues that correlate between racing and tennis are I think, Frank, you said earlier, the principles of integrity are the same across all sports. But here are ours. We collaborate a lot with the betting industry itself. We have data sharing agreements both with betting operators directly, but also their member associations like IBIA. We also work with bet monitoring companies like Sport Radar or Genius or Infront, and they will report any suspicious betting to us. However, what is interesting and what we're seeing more of is the number or percentage of fixed matches that we can subsequently find out are fixed that were never alerted to us by the betting industry. Now, what we have found, and this is no disrespect to the betting industry because I know it's difficult, But we might have then gone back to the industry and said, can you just have a look at this game and see whether you saw anything, look again. And quite often they will then come back and go, actually, having looked again, we can see something that is a bit unusual. So part of our education remit isn't just educating our participants, but it's also making sure that we're feeding into operators of what to look for, current methodology, what we're finding in phones, how they're hiding the betting, how they're using people to put betting on. We're obviously, nobody here will not be aware of betting mules, but also we're seeing an increased use of VIP accounts, which betting operators are less likely to report or less keen to monitor, we find, but we're now seeing discussion about using them. So we can't just think that if a match is fixed, it will show up in the betting, because it may very well not. Another challenge is it's not uncommon for historic offences to become clear significantly later. So we may have had a betting alert, decided it's the first one, we're not going to investigate it. There's reasons why, because a betting alert doesn't mean that the match is fixed necessarily. It could be an indicator of that, but it could also be an indicator of a player who's injured or who wasn't feeling very well or bad weather. There's any number of reasons why a betting alert might be there. However, what we also might do is actually investigate a player, not find enough evidence to charge them, but then 2 or 3 cases down the line or 2 or 3 alerts down the line, they've got a bit sloppy, they've changed their phone, there's more things that we can find. Or alternatively, we're investigating somebody else, and in their device or in what we get from them, they disclose information that means that we can prove the other individual has breached the code. So that's not necessarily uncommon. If you see a tennis case, you might think, well, it's 2024 and this is talking about matches in 2022. It doesn't mean we've sat on it for 2 years and done nothing. It just means that we might have had, it's something current that's actually exposed the historic offence. Other thing that is absolutely undoubtable is that fixers are aware of industry triggers for alerts. So they seem to have quite a good understanding of how betting operators work and what will tip their monitoring systems into action. So we've got informed fixers, basically. Betting operators themselves, some are great, some share a lot with us, others share very little or will only share anonymous data, some don't share at all. That can be for any number of reasons. They might be restricted through their own legislation in their own home country, or it could just be that they just don't work with data in that way. But it's a very mixed picture as to what operators will share with us and what they'll share with us, and then also what they give us permission to use that data for, which is also can sometimes be challenging. It's great if they share the data, but if they won't let us use it for the purpose of prosecuting a player, then it becomes quite difficult. Some really basic challenges are actually finding our players. I know that sounds ridiculous, but unlike I came from football, I spent a long time in working for the English FA. Finding players is not difficult in team sports. It's certainly not difficult in football. If I want to find Mr. Haaland, I just need to ring up Man City or look at Man City's training schedule and I know where he is. Tennis doesn't work that way. Players can enter tournaments at the last minute. They can withdraw from tournaments at the last minute. They can enter without telling anyone they're going to enter until they get there. They can withdraw without telling anyone that they've withdrawn. So it's actually quite difficult sometimes because we don't want to give players any notice that they're under investigation. So we will turn up to a tournament that we believe that they're entered in, that we believe they're going to be playing in, and then approach them as they come off the court, hand them a demand for their phone, take their phone off them, do a download, or phone/phones. We have had one where we took 5 off an umpire, and then do an interview, do a download analysis, probably re-interview again once we've got a better idea of what's on the phone. But you can only do that if the player is at the tournament, and if they've withdrawn 2 hours before entry, then I've just spent quite a lot of money flying people around the world for no point. So that can be quite difficult. So trying to predict player movement is a big part of what we do. Easier for doping because of the whereabouts rules, but again, they only apply. Not every player is subject to those whereabouts rules, but it is a challenge. We're also limited in the fact that Players are constantly on the move. I suspect jockeys are too. They've always got the next meet to go to, I presume. Tennis players have always got the next competition to go to. So you might take their phone off them, and sure, under our demand and our rules, we can keep it for as long as we need. But in reality, that player needs to be on a plane the next day. If the download is taking 24 hours, because it's a massive phone, that inherently causes friction and a problem. So that can be a difficulty as well. Naturally occurring fixed results is an issue for us, but this is mainly to do with chair umpire cases. It can be, personally, this is just a personal frustration, but I find it deeply, deeply frustrating when we've spent a long time investigating a chair umpire. We can show messages between fixers and the umpire where they've agreed to fix the score. We can show references to payment, even if we can't find the money, and we charge that and we put before a commission. But the match just went to the fixed result anyway, and the umpire didn't actually need to fix the score, and then our hearing officers have been very loath to find that proven. So naturally occurring fixed results can actually scupper our investigations. I was going to say thankfully most people fix more than one match, but that sounds wrong, right? But it's definitely an issue. The known unknowns and the unknown unknowns, I'm guessing everyone in this room has those. So a known unknown for us is the illegal betting markets that Martin was just speaking about. We know they're out there. We're pretty sure there are probably a lot of tennis betting going on them, but we know very little about them. And as with everything, trying to trace through illegal betting is really, really difficult. So that is a known unknown. I suppose you could argue it is kind of worrying that we're managing to get quite we have a number of cases in tennis through the legal betting market, so maybe they don't need to go to the illegal betting markets, but it's definitely a known unknown. And the unknown unknowns, who knows? No idea. What do we not know? Probably a lot, but obviously it's we've no idea what else there might be out there. But certainly keeping up to date and trying to make sure that we understand what's going on is a big part of what we do in our intelligence team in particular. Another challenge there is LEA delay. That's law enforcement agency delay. I think we always have to be careful when we talk about this, because the involvement in law enforcement in sports corruption is generally a good thing. I think we all agree with that. The problem is that, and it's already been alluded to, I think, in somebody's question, was law enforcement investigations and legal process through criminal courts takes an awful long time. There is an argument that it's not really that much use to sport if you take out a corrupter 2 years after they finished playing, and in the meantime they've corrupted a load of other games because they weren't subject to a provisional suspension because they couldn't be. Is that helping sport? I think there's an inherent conflict to a certain extent between law enforcement and sport in terms of what our purpose is. Absolutely, we want organised criminals taken out so that they don't corrupt tennis. But our immediate and present danger is people corrupting tennis right now, and we need to get those players out while law enforcement do their job of tracking down the people behind the players. It's really difficult. There is no easy solution, but I do think it's something that law enforcement and sports need to work better at, to try and find solutions where we can take the tennis, in our case, tennis players, out of the sport whilst the law enforcement investigation carries on. And the cynic in me, and I'm allowed to say this because I used to work in law enforcement, is really catching criminals is a little bit like whack-a-mole anyway. So you'll take out one group of organised criminals and they'll just be replaced by another overnight anyway. So actually, is it in sport's best interest to wait for those criminals to be taken out if they're going to be immediately replaced, whilst you're leaving players corrupting tennis and damaging the reputation of the sport? I don't have a solution for that one, and I know you should never present an issue without a possible solution, but I don't have one. So that's another one. It's not on this slide, but one of the things that I would say has been a challenge for us, but that we are working and to improve, and we are seeing improvement, is gaining trust of your sport. So the only people who really, really know what's going on in a sport is the people who are playing it. And we in tennis, and when I started, one of the things that I was led with the challenge of was we keep prosecuting people, and then you'll go to a tennis tournament and the umpires will go, oh, well, it was no surprise, was it, that he was he was convicted, and we're just like, well, it was a surprise to us. Like, what do you know that we don't know, and why are you not telling us? So that is a really important point for us, is trying to improve the communication between our membership, our players, our umpires, our tennis support personnel, to tell us what's going on. And I think, and again, I don't have any overnight solutions, but things that we have seen an improvement in is we have changed our wording, so we're very careful about the language that we use. Historically, it was always like report corruption, report offences, and we found players and officials were saying, well, I didn't report it because I wasn't sure. I didn't have enough to say it was definitely an offence. I just had a feeling, or it was just a rumour, or I know that this player comes from not a very affluent family at all. She's not doing very well on the tour, but all of a sudden she's carrying a Gucci handbag. She's walking around in Christian Louboutin shoes. That's a very female reference. Sorry about that. So we change now. If you look at our website now, it doesn't say report, it says talk to us, come and talk to us. In our strategy, we're all about listening. We're being far more visible on tour, and we are not turning up suited and booted. We're in sports t-shirts, trying to look a little bit more approachable, friendly, and we're visible and around tournaments and trying to be there and be engaged and make sure that people realise that seeing the ITI at a tournament does not mean anybody's done anything wrong. It means that we're there to support the players who are there and the officials who are there. And if they've got questions or queries, they don't know how to check a supplement out, they can come and ask us. And equally, if our visibility there is also a deterrent, then great. But that's not our primary purpose. And then just lastly from me, these are just some things that we're seeing a lot of. We're seeing a lot of use of burner phones. I'm sure those of you who investigate know what I mean by burner phones. This is not their real phone that they just use in case they get pulled over by us and they just hand us this phone. Historically, they've been very easy to identify because if there's only 4 messages on it and 2 photographs of a dog, then you can be pretty sure it's not their real phone. However, we've also uncovered deleted messages recently from phones where fixers have been educating players on how to make a burner phone look like a real phone. So they're like teaching them how to evade detection. Because to be honest, I haven't yet met a tennis player who started playing professional tennis with the intention of corrupting it. Something's gone wrong along the way. Somebody's got to them, or something has happened, a set of circumstances, and meant them make the wrong choices. So they're not, great criminals, which is great for us. But, criminals are teaching them how to become better at it. We're seeing an increased use of intermediaries, both for payment and approach. So it won't be the fixer that approaches the tennis player. It'd be great if we could say, it's going to be some shady bloke in a bad suit and sunglasses. They're the people you need to look out for. They're not. They're going to be people in the game. They're going to be coaches. They're going to be players. And actually, before, it always used to be people who were at the fringes of tennis who are doing this, and one of the things that we're seeing recently is it's actually active players and coaches now getting involved in corrupting others, and that is a real worry for us, and that'll be a high priority case for us. So if it's someone who's on tour, who's playing, is not only corrupting his own game, but he's now trying to convince others to do it and bring them into a network, that's a real worry for us. We're seeing an increased use of Bitcoin and Binance and finance generally. That's really hard. Following that kind of money is really difficult. We're seeing an increase in payments amounts where people were being offered like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 euros to throw a match. And when I mean a match, a game or a set, so not necessarily the whole match, we're now seeing them being offered 10,000, 20,000. We saw reference to 300,000 on a message just recently, which we're hoping was just bravado and not a real amount, but it's definitely going up. And we're also seeing a move to higher levels of tennis. So the corruptors are actively looking for players who are playing at a higher level. Again, don't assume that your highest level of sport is protected. It may very well not be. And then finally, we're seeing definite increase of organised networks, whether they be criminal, which are really concerning, or even just organised networks within the sport itself, working together to corrupt together. So it's not necessarily an individual agent anymore. We are seeing that, and that again is in doping too, not just in the corruption space. I'm sure by now you've heard enough of my voice. And also, by the way, I feel like an absolute dwarf at this podium. So I have no idea if you can only see my forehead. But thank you very much.
Jenny, thank you so much. Our next speaker is Brett Clothier, who is the head of the Athletics Integrity Unit.
Hello everyone. To the IFHA, thank you very much for this invitation. It's great to be here. Today I'm going to talk about the Athletics Integrity Unit and our approach to anti-doping. And hopefully, for those who know me, I used to work in racing, in Racing Victoria. And there are, of course, huge differences between doping in human sports and in the horses, but hopefully what I speak about today, there is some lessons to be learnt or things to be picked up for racing as well, despite those differences. So, just a bit of background about the Athletics Integrity Unit. So, this gentleman on the screen here is an absolute world champion at corruption. He was the president of the IAAF, which is the world governing body for athletics, and he was caught paying bribes, receiving bribes from athletes, charging them $300,000 a pop to make their positive test disappear. So this incredible scandal is the thing that created the Athletics Integrity Unit. The scandal gave rise to a really significant and important reform process at World Athletics, as it's now called. They created the Athletics Integrity Unit as a centrepiece of this reform process. The Athletics Integrity Unit was created by amending the Constitution of World Athletics. We have an independent board. We are operationally independent. And it essentially creates a system whereby the commercial side of the business and the regulatory side of the business are separated. So I report, as you can see there, to an independent board. None of our reporting lines are through to the commercial side of the business. You can see our team structure there. We're a staff of 40 now since our creation in 2017. We have a remit that's broader than just anti-doping. We also cover anti-corruption, conduct, safeguarding. A lot of the work we do includes things like competition manipulation, betting, related offences, age manipulation. But today we'll talk about anti-doping. So in anti-doping in our sport, it's really all about out-of-competition testing. Okay, the in-competition testing is a significant part of the program, but where you really catch the real cheats, the top-level people, is in out-of-competition testing. And you can see from the numbers there, out-of-competition's in blue. The majority of our program is out-of-competition testing. So to do out-of-competition testing, we have a registered testing pool. And in the track and field, we have a registered testing pool of 450 athletes. This represents the very elite athletes of the world. That's basically the top 10 rankings in each discipline. Top 10 100 metres, top 10 800, etc. Top 10 in high jump. That's who we're really focused on, the absolute top of the tree. We're trying to protect Olympic gold medals, World Championship gold medals, Diamond League, etc. So to test people out of competition, we have to collect whereabouts from them. And those top athletes all have to provide their whereabouts. That is, every single day of the year, they have to give us their overnight location and a 1 hour window where they will be available for testing. And that's how we do our out-of-competition testing. Those 450 athletes, they're located in at least 90 different countries. So we have to set up infrastructure to be able to carry out testing absolutely globally, whenever and wherever we need to do it. So this is the mantra of our testing, out-of-competition testing program. The right athlete, the right time, the right test. And the reason this is our mantra is because the doping practices these days are very, very difficult to detect for top-end dopers. the substances that they use, the methodologies like microdosing, are in and out of an athlete's system in what could be as little as 6 hours. Okay, so we're talking about detecting doping 6 hours after it has happened, or 12, 24, maybe 48 if we're lucky. That's where the top-end dopers, how they're operating. So the right athlete, the right time, the right test is our mantra. There's no point in us planning a test that has a 2-week, we'll test that person sometime in June or July, or we'll test them 3 times in Q1. That just does not work. If you do the odds on that, you realise that's a hopeless way to do it. So what we need our testing programs to be: dynamic, responsive, unpredictable, individualised testing programs. So all 450 of these top-level athletes are followed individually. We look at their history, their whereabouts, their patterns, their performance, their biological data that's coming in. All of that goes to produce an individualised testing program with our test planners, our test coordinators, making specific plans for each athlete. This has to be continuously updated, so these test coordinators we have are constantly digesting, analysing new information as it comes in. We do, you saw in the slides before, 10,000 tests a year. Each test generates its own data, because each test is not just positive or negative, there's biological profiling data that comes back. So that's being digested constantly. We're constantly looking at changes in whereabouts. We're constantly looking at test reports from the field. We're constantly looking at intel that's gathered. And so what this creates for our test planners is a hugely difficult task. All of that unstructured data into planning a single test. So we use technology. We've invested a lot in technology over the last few years to make this possible. The idea for our test planners, they don't want to be operating, looking at emails that they've received from test reports in the field. They don't want to be operating on tons of different spreadsheets from the scientists. We've invested in the technology so everything they're doing comes into one place. I like to think of the movie Minority Report, where Tom Cruise is doing that thing, and we haven't quite got there yet. But what we've got is a pretty good system that brings everything into one place for our test planners. Visually, it's based on a calendar, which is what they love, because they see all the athlete performances, upcoming events, the tests that have been carried out, the tests that are planned. The little pop-up windows bring out the information they need to look at the same time. And this makes that job, the specific test planning, somehow possible for our team. There's a lot of data visualisation that goes with the plan. At any time, they can look around the world to see where our athletes are, specific groups of them, or individuals, or the whole lot. And obviously, there are dashboards, etc., all as well. So, I'll move to a case study to sort of bring out how this test planning process works. I will say the process, our approach to out-of-competition testing has worked. Since 2017, our organisation, you'll allow me to boast a little bit about our success. We've racing not included, but compared to other human sports, we have a great track record of actually catching people and actually catching top-level dopers, which most other sports, that just doesn't happen. Obviously, I know it happens in racing, but in the world of human sports, it's quite rare. Here's one case study. Blessing Okabare, a Nigerian Olympic silver medalist, world championship medalist, multiple world championship medals. Her doping case arose in 2021 around the Tokyo Olympics. I'll take you through it. So, does anyone recognise this city? I'll buy you a beer if you get it. Getting closer? Any guesses? Jacksonville, Florida. Okay. So Blessing Okabare in June she lived at this time in the United States, and she was training in Florida. A lot of athletes live and train in Florida. So she was maybe she was 32 at the time, heading into Tokyo Olympics. 2020 had been COVID. I don't think she competed at all during 2020, but she'd started to run pretty fast times at the start of the year, so she was on our radar. We planned a test specifically for this specific day in early June 2023, and it was, as it turned out, a missed test. So the athletes in the pool are allowed to miss 3 tests in a 12-month period. If they miss 3, it's a violation, a 2-year penalty. She already had 1 missed test prior to this, but we went to this specific testing mission to test her, and she didn't answer the door. In her explanation to us, she told us that she had the doorbell wasn't working. She was asleep upstairs in her bedroom, and she blamed the doping control officer for not knocking loudly enough. So we got a big submission from her about this. What it turned out, the reality was quite different. Because in our investigation, which I'll come to later, we uncovered, with the help of the FBI, her text messages. I'm not sure, can you read that? Yeah. So this is her message to Eric Lira, doctor, who, as Andrew would tell you, is not actually a doctor. But that's how she had him in her phone. And these are the text messages they exchanged, asking the doping control officers here, should I take the test? Okay, I'm just not going to take the test. So this is what happens when top athletes are doping. They're not going to take the test if they think they have a chance of going positive. And that's why whereabouts is a really, really important requirement. That's why it's really important to prosecute the whereabouts cases vigorously. A lot of people want us to sort of go a bit softer on whereabouts cases, but you're never going to get a positive test without rigorous pursuit of whereabouts violations. So this is what was really happening. She got a missed test. Next location. Okay, we'll do it again. Any ideas? A guess? Nigeria, it's Lagos, very good. So later in June that year, so this is only 2 or 3 weeks after the missed test I'm talking about, she was racing in the Olympic trials in Nigeria, okay? She performed very, very well. She flew. I think she ran a PB in the 100 metres. We tested her, and this is part of our test planning. When you have a missed test, you're straight onto planning the next test. And in this case, we planned our next test in Lagos to be the day after the trials finished. Okay, so she's tested in competition at the trials. Is a normal thing to happen domestically. But we planned a test for her in Lagos the day after it's finished, kind of thinking that would be an unexpected thing to do the day after competition. This is her text messages to her Eric Lira doctor. You can read them there. She's very, very excited because she's run fast. Whatever you're doing is working. Fantastic. So that test turned out positive to EPO. Okay, I'll come back to that because we took the test. Initially, we didn't test it for EPO. This is where it comes to the right substance, the right time. She's a sprinter. We don't do EPO testing in every sample. It's expensive. We do it in a proportion of ours. We didn't initially test this sample for EPO. I'll tell you why we came back and did it later. Okay, next location. Anyone? No? Geez, I thought someone might get one of these. Does this help? No. Samarin, Slovakia. Okay. So, pre-Olympics, she goes to Slovakia to prepare for the last few weeks before the Games. In between our tests in Lagos and the testing we do here, we receive great intelligence out of the US that she is doping with human growth hormone. And this is an operation that's in cooperation with the United States Anti-Doping Agency and via them through the FBI and Adam's old office. Andrew's old office. So we received great intelligence that she's doping in Slovakia. Very, very quickly, we have to be able to organise testing in Slovakia. But luckily we can. So within a day or two of receiving that information, we've got people following her around at a hotel in Slovakia. We tested her very early, 5 a.m. in the morning. And this is a test that ends up being positive to human growth hormone. At the time, this is pretty much a week leading into Tokyo. This is a friendly, supportive drug dealer, just giving her some encouragement heading into the Games. Okay, this one I'm really confident everyone's going to get. Where is this? Tokyo, yes. This is Blessing winning her. So we're in the, we've gone all parts of the world, Northern Hemisphere, Southern, Eastern, Western. Now she's in Tokyo. She cruises through her first heat, looks very, very good, wins it easily. And in between the time of Heat 1 and the semi-final, we received the testing report from the laboratory, positive to human growth hormone. So remember, human growth hormone is one of these substances that is very hard to detect. It's out of your system in maybe 12 hours, normally. This is the message to the drug dealer. This time, no reply. No reply. So, Blessing, this was created a big storm in the middle of Tokyo. Very high profile, lots of articles. She was one of the favourites for a medal in Tokyo, and it was very high profile. She went back almost immediately to the US, where she was picked up at the airport by the FBI, who took her phone and took images of the relevant messages that I've shown you here today. We were able to assist the prosecution of Eric Lira by getting this positive test, which confirmed everything. They were able to prosecute Eric Lira in the US. We prosecuted Blessing Okabare. She got 11 years. Multiple doping positives, failure to cooperate because we asked her to provide her phone and other data. She refused to cooperate. Tampering in terms of her mistest, where she gave us fake explanation for the mistest. So she got an 11-year penalty in the end. So that's all from me. Look forward to speaking to you on the panel. Thank you.
Thoroughly fascinating hearing the sequence of events there. And no doubt people have some questions lined up for you, Brett. Our final speaker on this subject before we get to the panel and the Q&A is Susan Ahern, a barrister, arbitrator, independent vice chair, Irish Horse Racing Regulatory Board Disciplinary Panel.
Good afternoon, everybody, and my thanks to the IFHA for the invitation to come here today. It really is an honour and a privilege. And I know this is headed up as a cutting edge approaches, and I'm so cutting edge I don't even have slides. But I always like, when talking about integrity, to ask the question at the beginning, what is integrity? What do you understand integrity to mean? You know, is it something that's defined in a rule? Or is it, as Andrew said at the beginning of the day, when he defined it as being honest and having strong moral principles? Or is it simply as simple as just doing the right thing? So over the course of the next few minutes, I hope that I'm going to give you some insights into what I've learned coming from the perspective as the head of legal in World Rugby for a long time, where I was responsible for integrity, and now sitting on disciplinary panels across a variety of sports and bodies. I'm probably going to start with the end in mind, and that is that I am going to tell you that integrity is more than awarding a sanction when someone misbehaves. And hopefully at the end of this, you'll understand why I think that. So I'm just going to touch upon the transformative nature of the integrity issue over the last 10 years. And then I'm really going to focus in on the area of integrity of governance in sport, stemming from the principle of good governance, you know, and what that is, and also its manifestation through codes of ethics. So context is everything. If I had been standing here talking to you 10 years ago, I would definitely have spoken about anti-doping. I'd have been talking about the latest WADA code, which was the one that started to introduce the importance of whereabouts information. And Brett has given you a really fantastic case study as to why that is important and how effective it is. I would also have been telling you that the status of the Code of Arbitration for Sport as the Supreme Court for all anti-doping matters under the WADA Code was well established. And unlike the examples that were given of horse racing cases that have gone through various courts nationally, then and now you see almost no anti-doping cases for humans going to national courts, unless, of course, those particular jurisdictions also have criminal legislation within domestically. Everything is going up through to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. And as a member of the anti-doping panel of the CAS, I really do see firsthand the efforts that sport is going to, that all sports are going to, in order to try and keep their sport clean. It's also possible to see the elaborate schemes that some regimes have engaged in order to cheat the system. And then there's the other end of the spectrum, and that's the athletes. And I have seen the difficulty that athletes have when they're found to have a positive sample and they're trying to figure out how the substance came to be within their system. Sometimes they know, and sometimes they do not, and it can be quite difficult. But the fact is that over the last 25 years, the anti-doping system under WADA has become well established. Going back a decade again, I would also have spoken to you about anti-corruption. And certainly for World Rugby at that time, anti-corruption was something that was more theoretical than it was in actual practice. Scandals were coming out in a number of sports, and the time was ripe to inform the board about these scandals and to try and stay ahead. And what we did is we introduced a comprehensive anti-corruption rules system in 2011, founded on some basic principles, but effectively it was about making sure that professional rugby players and international rugby players and their player support personnel did not bet on the sport of rugby. And that was quite a big thing coming from where we had started. But the really important aspect of that was that this wasn't just about rules. Those rules were accompanied by a structure, and that structure was founded upon education. And we created a program called Keep Rugby On Side, which was rolled out at the same time as the rules in 15 languages, helpfully paid for in part by the European Union, and online, and also supported by a monitoring program that involved integrity officers. Those officers would be present and visible at international tournaments, not only to be there to educate the players, but also to be there to be the recipients of information were approaches made to the athletes. And then in 2015, we rolled out the first Rugby World Cup integrity program at the Games in London. And that was done in conjunction with the Met Police and the UK Gambling Authority. And that has been the modus operandi for all Rugby World Cups since. And it was important that we did that, because on the eve of the Rugby World Cup in 2019, a senior member of the management team of the Welsh Rugby Union, Robert Howley, was charged with prohibited betting. So he hadn't been engaged in a corrupt scheme. What he had been was somebody who really liked betting. But he bet a lot, and he also bet on matches that were prohibited. And ultimately, he received a 4-year sanction, which was suspended for 2 years. So that was then, and this is now. Let's fast forward to 2024. The challenges of anti-doping and anti-corruption, they haven't gone away. You've heard that from the brilliant presentations by Jenny and Brett. I mean, they've given you a real insight into what it's really like behind the scenes. But what has happened is that they're better regulated and they're better managed by the sports. And the reality is, in my view, that the scope of what constitutes integrity today is expanding in the modern sporting environment. Somebody not cheating is a necessary but insufficient definition of integrity in sport. And I think that is to look at integrity from the negative perspective. Integrity isn't just about making sure that people don't cheat. It's also about ensuring that there is a culture of doing the right thing, that the approach to integrity is a positive one and much more comprehensive, and therefore that it gives rise, in my view, to the requirements to, for example, treat athletes appropriately and to manage the sport properly. And what we are witnessing in recent times is a trend to that expansion in what integrity means. Issues such as player welfare, safeguarding, and good governance practices are all extraordinarily important today. In 2017, Baroness Tanni Gray-Thompson undertook a reporting exercise and produced the report Duty of Care in Sport Review, which called on the need to put the athlete at the centre of safeguarding. There were fantastic recommendations made, few of them were implemented. And if you look today, in the last 12 months even, we have seen the amount of issues that have been arising in a multiplicity of sports across a multiplicity of jurisdictions, where there have been scandals that involve the abuse of athletes physically, sexually, racially, and/or mentally. And it's time for the athlete to become centre stage. And athletes and their representative bodies are making their voices heard much more. And so I can give examples of UK Sport, who launched the Sports Integrity Hotline, where abuse can be notified to the relevant authorities. And we see at the international level, the International Olympic Committee, who always had a hotline for anti-corruption matters, at least since 2015, have expanded that out now to deal with any alleged breaches of their code of ethics. And they make that available to international federations as well. And I had an opportunity to read your IFHA handbook today, and safeguarding is called out in there. And you've set out a framework. So you, as a sport, are conscious of the need to deal with safeguarding. But that's a conference in and of itself. And so what I'm really going to talk about for the rest of my remarks is about good governance. Now, what is it? Well, good governance implies that policies and procedures are in place to ensure that the organisation is well run. And beyond rules and regulations, good governance is about an organisation's ethical culture. Now, I didn't make that up. That was the Good Governance in Sport working group of the European Commission some years ago, who really focused in on this point. But I would summarise by saying, it's what you do when no one else is looking. That's what's important. We've seen the example of failures in leadership with the IAAF and Lamé Diack, the former president of IAAF. We've also seen it in FIFA, where between 2010 and 2016, FIFA had alleged bribery in the process of awarding the hosting of the 2018 and the 2022 World Cups to Russia and Qatar. There were FBI investigations and prosecutions of senior football figures, And ultimately, the president, Sepp Blatter, received a 6-year suspension over disloyal payments. And that was a suspension that was appealed to and upheld by the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So these examples of poor leadership, where there are governance failures, where there's hubris, where there's a lack of integrity on a global stage, really does impact the sports. And I think all due credit is due here to those particular sports who made some radical changes, and there is definitely a before and after moment. They changed their leadership, they changed how they approached integrity, they put the athlete at the center of what they were doing, they embraced transparency, and they set up integrity units that were dedicated to upholding those rules. And they also implemented codes of conduct. So if I look at this today, I think the change that's happening in this space, because good governance isn't new, but the change that's happening is that there are new environmental shifts. There are new modern imperatives that we have to take account of. There's growing player power through representative bodies, through high-profile athletes who are prepared to speak out, and there are lawsuits. There's also the need to maintain public confidence in the sport. And as Justice Clark mentioned at the very beginning of today, it is that centre ground that we need to be mindful of, not the people who are inside the bubble. There's also commitments to government and by governments in funding sport, particularly at a national level. They care how you behave, and they want sport to comply with the national codes of conduct. We certainly have them in Ireland, and they exist in the United Kingdom also. And then there's also the autonomy and the self-regulation of sport. Sometimes that can get forgotten, but I think all we need to do is look at what the European Commission has been doing over the last couple of decades in terms of investigations across football, Formula One, and equestrian. And you look at the activism of the European Court of Justice at the moment, where you have cases that involve, albeit competition-related issues, they are actually fundamentally about how sports are regulating themselves, how they are writing the rules, and how they are implementing them. So looking at the ISU case, the Super League case, and the Daria case that only came out on Friday, you are seeing that trend, and it is going to get ever more increasing. So really, the message is that sports bodies really must live with a culture of integrity, because if you do that, it will emanate through your sport, through your rules. And I want to bring it back now just to rugby and what the International Rugby Players Associations ask for their members. They demand quality, governance, and management of their sport. And so rugby introduced a code of ethics as distinct from a code of conduct, which is a different thing, for their sport. And they did this to reflect what they say are the behaviours of the sport by those who are trusted with the governance and the administration of the sport. And those are based upon best practice in corporate and sporting governance. So not one world, not the other, both worlds. Now, rugby came to the table in 2021 because it was clear that its anti-corruption rules were the only place where there was a fit and proper person test, and that wasn't wide enough. And so when an individual with a serious criminal record came to be put forward for a position on the top council, the gap, shall we say, in the rules became apparent. And so the new code of ethics was put into place. And in 2023, when the then vice chairman was found convicted in France of contriving to influence peddling and engage illegally acquiring assets in his own country and was forced to resign, that code of ethics really came home to deliver. So what are the benefits of a code of ethics? Well, in addition to dealing with the modern imperatives that I talked about before, I think it's also really important that those that govern sport make sure that they hold themselves up to the highest standards of honesty, impartiality, equity, and integrity when they discharge their duties. And we'd like to think that everybody who is in that role knows what that looks like, but it's actually really important to write it down. So In the World Rugby Code of Ethics, it adopts two strands. There's the general strand, which deals with what is the expected standard of behaviour we expect of those that govern us, and they're set out. They're also clear on what's not permitted. No abuse, no harassment, no discrimination. You must comply, of course, with applicable laws and regulations, and you must not have any unspent criminal convictions. I think that came in as a result of experience. But then there are the specific aspects to the code. You have to be over 18, you can't be bankrupt, you must not be a disqualified company director, the kind of things that you would expect. But there's also some positive obligations in there. You have to comply with a code of integrity, or conflicts of interest policy, and they set out what that is. You have to comply with the gifts and hospitality policy, and they set that out. So, I mean, I'm a sole trader, and I attended the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe yesterday, as I'm sure all of you did. So I only had to ask myself, did I comply with my policy? But there may be people in this room who had to go through a clearance process in order to be there, and that's only as it should be. There's also anti-corruption rules, requirements on confidentiality, and really quite importantly as well, I think from a sports perspective, particularly when dealing with the autonomy question, is that political neutrality is a requirement, that the individuals must be autonomous from government interference in their dealings as officials. Now, the IFHA handbook does deal with some of these points. It points out some of the policies, and it is directing you as its members to where you need to go. So you're absolutely on point. And I think that as an exercise, you know, these codes of ethics, they are available in lots of sports. There's no reinvention of the wheel required, but it does really set out what is imperative for those who are dealing with the sport. Of course, that needs to be implemented as well, and so it's supported by an independent ethics officer with powers of investigation and so on, and there's also a corresponding independent judicial process that works in tandem with that, and I don't need to get into those. The other thing I would point out, though, is that there is a whole schedule in relation to vetting, predetermining the eligibility of vetted persons who want to be candidates to sit at rugby's top table. Now, it's not just World Rugby that has this. I do have a vetting role with World Athletics, and I have sat on a vetting panel as an independent member for a particular international federation that was having some difficulty with the IOC, who described them as having a problem with their culture and leadership. And so this kind of pre-process for the future leaders of a sport, this eligibility clearinghouse is certainly becoming part of the norm in international sport. And it's important that it doesn't just stay at the international level. That obviously needs to filter down to the national bodies, and if you're a national body, it needs to filter down to your membership. So just to conclude, I think my point here really is that the people who run sport set the tone from the top. And sometimes they need guidance in order to make sure that they keep the car between the ditches. And sporting bodies have a lot to grapple with in this modern world in order to stay free from cheating, free from manipulation, from all of these external factors that are influencing the sport, be that human or animal. It's not an easy task, for sure, but it is absolutely essential. So the promise I made at the start of my remarks, that I believed integrity is more than awarding a sanction when someone misbehaves, I really do believe that it is about doing the right thing, and I hope that you now understand why I think that. Thank you.